once again to Cable Sports. My name is Anthony Powell, and as always, I'm joined here by my co-host, Bill Schulman. The focus of our show is a little bit different today. As you know, we usually discuss a plethora, and I know you didn't know I had that large of a vocabulary, a plethora of sports topics. Today we're going to be focusing on the world of bodybuilding and of athletic body training. And to do that, we have a former Mr. America and Mr. Universe, Mike Mentzer, who is now an athletic trainer at Gold's Gym in Venice. And Mike has also written 3 books on bodybuilding. And along with Bill, Mike, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Thank you, Anthony.
Okay, and I guess a logical point would be to start with, how did you first learn about bodybuilding, and how did you first know that this is what you wanted to devote a large portion of your life to?
Well, it's one of those proverbial, often heard stories in bodybuilding. I was at a drugstore with my mother in my hometown of Ephrata, Pennsylvania, and while she was off doing some shopping, I was looking over the magazines, and all of a sudden my attention was arrested by the sight of a muscle man. And I knew instantly, there was no lag time, this is what I was going to be, and it was a love affair, and I've been doing it ever since.
That's interesting.
I'll be darned. Let me ask you, Mike, what role do you think genetics plays in the sport of bodybuilding?
It's very important. It's hard to determine exactly how important, along with motivation and the discipline involved, of course. I would say it's right up there, a prime determinant for sure. So
you're saying that there are certain people who are born with certain body types or certain muscle lengths that they can't correct for?
Yeah, I think most sports tend to have certain body types that excel more than other body types. For instance, in basketball, either you're born 7 feet tall or you're not. In bodybuilding, the indices aren't quite as evident, but things like you mentioned, muscle belly length, bone size, and then one that's not so tangible is an inherited predisposition towards building muscle mass, and that's something you can't determine until you actually begin training. Some people, when they start training, grow almost immediately. Then there are other people who train for years and years, as you've probably seen in various gyms, who never grow at all.
Something that I was curious about, because there's so many different theories about training, and I hear people say, well, you can eat anything you want as long as you're working out constantly, and I've never held that to be true. How important is diet when one is training? Is there a percentage where you should devote to exercise versus diet? Or?
No, I think they're both 100% important. Years ago there was a saying that diet is 80% of bodybuilding, but I don't think you can quantify it that way. You've got to train properly and you've got to eat properly. I think diet is important because one of the first requisites in being a great athlete is that you're healthy, and you've got to eat a well-balanced diet to be healthy. But I don't think it's any more important than that. Many athletes tend to overemphasize certain elements of diet like vitamins and protein, and again, the most important requirement is that you eat a well-balanced diet just so that you're healthy.
Kind of a follow-up on that, is there a percentage that you should devote in your diet to, let's say, carbohydrates, to protein, to fat?
Well, if you were to listen to the hucksters of the nutritional products, you would believe that your diet should be made up entirely of protein. But if you listen to qualified nutritional scientists, you'll hear most often that your diet should be 65% carbohydrates, 25% protein, and 15% fats. That's true for athletes and the average individual alike.
I know a lot of people, it seems like the bodybuilding era is starting to pick up more in the last, say, 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, I think so.
And a lot of these athletes, men and women, come from different sports. Do you consider bodybuilders to be athletes, or would you consider the sport more of a discipline?
Well, I think all sports involve discipline. It depends upon how you define sport. The fact that you have all these men around the world engaged in serious physical training, which will eventually culminate in the pursuit of a competitive goal, I think it's a sport.
Okay.
Talking about your career today as an athletic trainer, are you enjoying sharing your knowledge that you've obtained over the years and sharing it with other people and helping them build their bodies? Is it giving you a lot of personal satisfaction?
Yes, it is. I competed for, up to 10 years, and as you may know yourself, athletic training gets to be a little old as you get older yourself. But now I do enjoy sharing the knowledge that I acquired over the years of my own training with my clients, and it's very, very satisfying.
Mike, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who would like to improve their physiques and their bodies and would want to go to perhaps a trainer. But what should somebody look at when they are looking into getting a trainer? What are some of the qualifications maybe?
Well, not necessarily his muscular development or even his athletic appearance. It's actually very difficult. Presumably the person's going to the gym because he knows little or nothing about training. I think the only way to do it would be to assess his general intelligence level and listen as to how well he explains the principles of productive exercise, as to whether or not he has a grasp of the principles of exercise.
A couple of things that I've run across, and while I've been training, is that people generally want either two types of ways to improve their body. They either want to get more muscle mass, or they want to become defined. Talk about a little bit about the different theories between gaining mass, what you should do, and maybe if somebody just wants to remain lean and not really gain any mass.
Good point. As a matter of fact, there are two types of basic training. You can train either for muscle mass or endurance, which tends to burn body fat and keep you lean. For those who want to build muscle mass, the most important principle is that of intensity. The harder you train, the more weight you lift, the more you put into it, the more muscle you'll develop. And those who are looking to just remain lean and not develop muscle, perhaps tone themselves, the intensity factor, the amount of weight they lift is not so important. They don't have to push themselves quite as hard.
Let me ask you, Mike, there's been a lot of talk for years and years and years, and not only in bodybuilding, but several sports, about the use of steroids.
Right.
How prevalent are they today compared to when you were competing?
Well, I think generally there's a movement away from steroid use since the increased media attention towards the deleterious effects of steroids. But in those who are still competing, I think there's an even greater use and abuse of steroids. For those who are hell-bent on competing, there's definitely more steroid use. And even beyond steroids now, they're taking what's called growth hormone, which is not a steroid compound in itself, but does affect the body's rate of growth enormously, from what I hear.
As far as giving you more size and bulk?
More muscle mass.
Okay. Have there been any proven studies? Because another thing you hear from a negative side amongst the general public is, for instance, a male will not be able to have kids 10 years from now. Is this all just, I know you've talked about that.
Well, as is the case with the media, very often when there's something that's possibly dangerous, they tend to get all kinds of things confused and they bring other issues into it. Yes, steroids can be dangerous in certain ways, but not that particular way. It does not affect fertility. I know of many top bodybuilders who have been training and taking steroids for up to 20 and 30 years who have healthy families.
Do you feel they are necessary to compete on an international level with Mr. Olympia, the Lee Haneys of the world?
Without a doubt.
Not saying that Lee Haney does it, because I don't know if he does or does not, but I'm saying on that level.
Yeah, if you want to compete on even the local, national, international, or professional level, without a doubt, steroids are a part of it. And just to add one point there, you talked about the deleterious effects of steroids. One of the things you hear most often nowadays is a thing called steroid rages. That's one of the things that has never been proven, along with the mistaken notion about affecting fertility. Things that are possibly affected are proper liver function, kidney, and so forth, glandular functions, but no, it does not affect fertility or the brain per se. It does not affect moods, it does not cause rages or tantrums.
Can you define for our audience what a steroid rage is supposedly?
Well, in the general media and in the bodybuilding media also, there have been reports about bodybuilders who have started fires, decimated whole bar rooms full of men because they're on steroids, and the implication is that steroids affect the mood, the personality. Those things do happen occasionally, as they happen out in the general public beyond bodybuilding, and those kinds of individuals are immature to begin with. There has never been one study that has proven conclusively that steroids do cause rages.
Are you saying it's pretty much necessary, if you're going to be at the top of the heap in bodybuilding, to pretty much use steroids only because everyone else is doing it?
Yeah.
Because that's the theory that you hear in other sports. Let's say in professional football, I was reading an article one time, and one lineman said that I take steroids only because I need to do it to compete, because everyone else is doing it. If I don't, I'm going to be thrown around.
I think there's more to it than that. It's true on that level. You have to take steroids to compete, but I think also the public has become accustomed now to seeing a certain level of development, and without steroids, the standard would go backwards and the public would lose interest. And the guys like it too. It's not just because they want to compete on a certain level. There are many bodybuilders in the gyms who don't compete and still take steroids because they want a certain look. Mm-hmm. That's not to say all of them do, but quite a few.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Where do you see the sport going from here, since the guys have already attained this size and mass and leanness. Can you get any leaner and any bigger?
No, I don't think so. There isn't much being done in the way of research towards increased training or improved training methods or improved nutritional or dietary regimens. And in part because of the public outcry against steroid use, I don't think there's a whole lot of research being done in the area of steroids either. I don't think you're going to see much improvement in the standard over the next few years in bodybuilding.
I think that one thing that needs to be touched on, though, is that I don't think people should get the idea that they can just take steroids and they're going to develop into these Greek gods. I mean, you've still got to train and diet intensely.
It's been proven that those who take steroids and do not train do not get any results either. And it should be stated to the general public that there is a definite health risk. I've been involved in bodybuilding for almost 30 years, and I've never met anyone, but that's not to say that there aren't those who haven't had health problems. I'm sure there are those guys out there who are taking many times the recommended daily dosage and are having problems. It just stands to reason that there's going to be somebody out there who does that. But it should be borne out, too, that there is a health risk, and there's also a legal risk involved now also. It's illegal to take steroids. Doctors can still prescribe them, but now the prescriptions require a triplicate. The government controls it, so it's much harder to obtain, and those who do take them are running a legal risk as well as a health risk.
Well, there's such an overall drug awareness in our country today that that's certainly added to the awareness of steroids in sports. So all those things, working together, make it kind of a dangerous thing to do.
You mentioned also along the same lines with, I guess, growth hormone for the layman, including myself. Would that give you size, and what effect would a steroid give you? Is it more energy, or what's the purpose?
No, steroids are growth hormone.
The difference between the two, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Well, I can't speak from personal experience. When I was competing years ago, I did take steroids. I never took growth hormone. From what I understand, the reaction is a little bit different with the growth hormone. It operates on different bodily systems, and the results are not quite as evident initially as with steroids. As soon as they start taking steroids, there's a response. Growth hormone, it takes time.
I'm curious, when you were competing, did you ever, because a lot of people don't like the appearance of bodybuilders, they think it's kind of grotesque. Was that hard for you to deal with, people saying to you, you look hard, you're too big, you're too...
No. As a matter of fact, I was always a bit of a rebel throughout my life, and the thought that I would be different from other people never bothered me, and when I heard that it bothered other people, it even gave me more impetus to continue training.
That's a good philosophy. I'm sure a lot of their negative comments come from jealousy, because
I think so too.
The dedication that it requires to look, like when you're competing is just tremendous.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've talked to many people in the past who claimed initially they didn't like the look of a bodybuilder. Then I would bring them to a physique contest and show them the magazine. Over a period of time, their standards changed. They didn't feel as threatened.
We've got a picture of Mike on the monitor here also.
Look at that picture.
Excuse me, Mike.
That was taken a few years ago, I must say.
But you can see the dedication that would take to look like that. I mean, that's hours and hours and hours of training there.
How many years was that to get to that point?
Well, that was 11 years ago. A photograph taken right before the 1980 Mr. Olympia contest, and I had been training at that point for about 15 years, off and on, but for about 7 years straight through right before that.
That's incredible.
But an important point, Anthony, I did not train for hours and hours every day, and this is an important issue.
Oh, okay.
Contrary to what most bodybuilders do, which is train 2 to 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, to obtain that condition, I trained literally for 30 minutes 4 times a week, 2 hours a week.
Yeah, because the theory that you always hear is that it does require hours and hours to look like that.
The mistaken premise there is that more is better. And the body doesn't necessarily work that way. If 2 hours or 4 hours a day were good, well, why not train 12 hours a day? Training is a form of stress, and up to a certain point in time, exposing the body to stress can be beneficial. But beyond a definite period in time, it can actually be detrimental.
That's interesting.
Let me ask you, amongst the top contenders in the world, or competitors, would everybody be training differently? Do you think, or do people know that less is actually better for them?
No, they don't. The vast majority of people who train almost exactly the same way, for 2 to 4 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. There are those who have read my articles and have attended my seminars and tend to be reasonable individuals, and train just for 30 to 45 minutes a day, 4 times a week.